to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. Right now we are breaking the earth. We cover chapters 6 through 10, I think, of The Stone Sky.
Stone Sky.
But before we get into the plot of those chapters, Laura, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
So I have read a couple things recently. For my book club, we read Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Unfortunately, I was not able to go to book club because I had a lot of stuff going on with my goats. It's been a busy few weeks, and finally,
Laura's swimming in goats, everyone.
I
So
literally am. It's so many. It's so many goats. Finally, everybody's done kidding. It kind of annoys me, like, to not have this more synced up than it was, because I generally what happens for people who don't know about like goat heat cycles, breeding cycles, they kind of all come into heat around a similar time, and if you don't get all of them bred, then you have to wait another heat cycle to get them bred. So what happened was I had most of them have a successful breeding, and then some of them did not get bred and had to wait till the next heat cycle. So now I am in a situation where I've got some that are 3 weeks older than the other ones. But finally, I'm done kidding. So that's a stress relief to not have to worry about like pulling baby goats or mothers in distress. And the other thing that was nice is none of them had babies in the middle of the night. So they all blessed me with morning and afternoon
that is very kind
births.
of them.
I know, how convenient. Just very nice to have just afternoon kids. That was really
Although
nice.
you don't get to see the behind the scenes of Laura texting me and being like, I can't record today. I have to take a goat to the vet. And I'm like, man, that
Yes.
sounds about right. Like, I would not be able to record either. So,
That was my one stressful incident. I had a goat not pass her afterbirth, and I was very upset because it was like a full day later, and that's just too long. So it was really concerning. But we got her taken care of. Everybody's good now. So yeah, I'm probably the only person that you know, Hannah, that has goat emergencies that can't
I
do
mean, if
things
I had a nickel,
because there's goat emergencies.
I like a goat emergency. It's better than the emergencies I have, which is just like, I'm unwell today. And Laura's like, okay, anything I can do? And I'm like, nope, bye.
I
So,
mean, I also have those, which is unfortunate. So I have multiple kinds of emergencies. But anyways, I had goat stuff going on and I wasn't able to make my book club, which was disappointing because this was a book that was rife for discussion, honestly. Like I talked a lot about it on Blue Sky just because I was trying to kind of process some thoughts about this book, but it's a I guess you would call it a speculative fiction or dystopian type book that kind of pictures the world after a genius releases a virus
mm,
and wipes out a bunch of people, but it's told through the POV of this character, Jimmy, who is very much a product of his upbringing, which is not great. And he is just kind of this oblivious man who doesn't ask enough questions, doesn't look into things, has terrible views on women, has terrible views on a lot of things, honestly, and is just like kind of this dumpster fire of a person, honestly. He was very frustrating to read for me. But we're getting these flashbacks of him meeting the person who Crake, who starts out being his friend, and they have these interactions playing games together, talking about their families, kind of growing up together. And then Crake is a genius and ends up going to this like really awesome school and having all these accolades and awards and everything, while Jimmy kind of goes to bad schools. I shouldn't say bad schools, but not the highest caliber institutions. And he doesn't really take advantage of opportunities. He kind of falls into cycles of bad behavior and things like that, that he doesn't really try to help himself out ever.
Hmm.
And like I said, he doesn't ever ask questions or wonder about like the systems that he's helping to perpetuate or that he is in. And like early on, we learned like his mother is even involved in certain types of resistance, fighting capitalism and the like. And he never seems to question why she is in those type of situations. And his mother's becomes somewhat of a villain, which was frustrating.
Hmm.
But I think that Atwood does a really good job of like setting up these characters and showing why they become the way that they are, even though they likely are set up to be very frustrating. I think we get to
Hmm.
see this through the flashbacks of why they become the person that they are and how things ended up developing in the story. And basically, the way that she tells it is that we get the story through flashbacks, and then in the present day, we're witnessing this snowman who is Jimmy in the present, and he is dealing with the aftermath of what has happened. And we kind of get what has happened through these flashbacks, and it slowly builds up to the timelines connecting.
It's very interesting that you've been covering a lot of these, and you and I have talked about this off mic, but the fact that your book club covers a lot of spec fiction, um, because it's weird that you're reading it and like juxtaposing it with the Broken Earth trilogy. I feel like
Right, right,
it's a
right.
very interesting journey that you are specifically on right now, where you get to see like all these different tellings of the end of the world and how like, this one is a more
This one was an
modern.
odd one.
This one is an odd one. And Oryx and Crake came out in 2003. Parable of the Sower came out before
90s.
that,
Hmm.
90s. So I think it's interesting that you've been able to see like different decades of what speculative fiction looks like. Um,
Sure.
and this one, like I mean, the Broken Earth trilogy is your 2010s technically, because
Hmm.
it was
Hmm.
later 2010s, but it's still there. And it's interesting to see your description of them and how they've like changed, or how, the stories kind of shift, where this one is like, ooh, the bad people that you see why they chose the things they chose. And I
Hmm.
feel like the Broken Earth trilogy is much more about like the marginalized groups themselves who get the most affected by these types of things. And,
Yeah, I
they're,
think that
yeah.
Octavia Butler also did a
Ye-
better job of honestly, Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower is because I've read now Oryx and Crake and I've read The Handmaid's Tale, and I know that people have made like a huge deal about, oh, we're living through The Handmaid's Tale and everything. I'm not gonna say that Margaret Atwood isn't a brilliant writer. She very much like draws you in with the prose and everything. It's very easy to read her books and everything, but at the same time, I feel like they her books seem more science fictiony than Parable of the Sower seemed like very real. You
right.
could very much feel the events
Well, it,
happening in our current system today in the United States and see, oh yeah, that's obviously
mhm.
what the next step would be versus this where it's like, is there going to be a super genius who has played video games with his friend and decides that he's going to release this disease out and
No, but there
that
is going to be one really bad fascist called Elon Musk who fakes that he
being
has
a super
hours and
genius?
hours of a video game when he doesn't, and it was pointless to lie about it. Have you heard that? Have I told you
No.
this? Elon Musk. So my husband is a huge Path of Exile fan,
Okay.
and there was a
I don't
lot
know what
of
Path of Exile
so
is.
it's a video game. It's just a video
Okay.
game, and every quarter or something, it resets. So all
So
people
it's always a new
restart.
game.
So
That's
it's all
cool.
very new, but there's like certain differences, but like it resets. Like you can't just continue with your old character. You're starting at square one. It's a whole
That's
thing.
cool.
Every time it releases, like he's gone for the weekend, and it's like one of his favorite times. So like great for him. When we went on our honeymoon, there was a rollout, and I felt really bad about it. But it could not be stopped. Um, but Elon Musk said like he was like one of the top like five people ranked this last go round. And like the people who are highly ranked are people who have spent like hundreds of hours, like don't sleep, And so a bunch of people were like, it would be impossible for you to be top ranked for this
Right.
game that like is built to reset itself. So you have to dedicate the time.
He's too busy doing like weird jumps and getting
Right.
women
And
pregnant
so
and stuff like
then
that and
he
neglecting his
exactly is
kids.
neglecting his children. He's a deadbeat dad. But like, so he was like, oh, I'm gonna go live and play it. And he like went live and played it. And it was obvious that he had not played it that much because he
Oh,
did
good
not
Lord.
know what the tools were for or their rankings or anything like that. So this
It
man just
makes sense for
lied
about
about,
everything
but
that
like, why? There's no point. Like, I was like, you could just say, like, I don't have enough time to lie about this very
this makes
specific game that's
complete
really easy
sense
to get
though.
caught on. Like, it's so easy to get caught that you were lying about this.
This is
And he
like the
just
man
did
that's
it.
like, we accidentally closed down this one program. We didn't mean to do that, but we got it back up and running now.
Oh God. But like, yeah, so that's the person who like has the ear of the president is a man who's like, no, I have like 600 hours on Path of Exile. And everyone's
I
like, no,
mean,
you don't. Like, you
makes
physically.
sense.
Oh, it's
It
just so
all
funny.
makes sense.
But anyway, so that's my Elon Musk tale of the day. But yeah, so like
Yeah.
you're gonna have
Which
like a dumb
maybe, I guess
billionaire, but
Margaret
like
Atwood might be more accurate. Who knows?
well, I do think it's interesting because I think like there have been critiques about Margaret Atwood's work that I think are very well, taken where people talk about like Handmaid's Tale is scary for white women because like
Hmm.
that those types of things did happen to women of color.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's a weird logical leap where Margaret Atwood's like speculative fiction is always told from a very like white perspective,
Oh, yeah.
where that's very limiting because like white people are usually not the first group to be disenfranchised, like in
Hmm.
America, which is often where this is taking place. So
Yes.
I think that that's interesting. I've read The Handmaid's Tale as
I
well
read The
as
Testaments, did not like that one
I
as
didn't read
much.
the Testament. I own it, but I just never got around to it. And I think like I
Meh.
started reading books that are like much better around, no offense to
Yeah, I
Margaret
don't know
Atwood. I
that I
think she's a
would
very skilled
read that
writer.
one.
But I read like The Robber Bride, and that was like a 70s, like, oh, very like ahead of its time. And I was like, is
Hmm.
it? This is kind of just like a bunch of shitty women with their shitty husbands. Like, and then I also read The Blind Assassin, which was
Okay.
fine. Like they're all very like I don't know. It's just like there's certain types of white women who aren't really struggling for money, like
Hmm.
having a bad time. Um, so, but I think it's interesting that you've been able to kind of see the differences between these
Yeah,
three different speculative,
it is
works.
unique to kind of jump into some of these dystopian works. I guess I would call them dystopian, and it's interesting to me to like kind of see like how people imagine the collapse of societies
Mm.
and how things are going to break down and how it's so different. And
Yeah.
honestly, like I said, so far in my mind, it seems like Octavia Butler's got it right on. And I don't know that some of these others are, they're obviously more sensational and a little bit scarier. And maybe that's the point that they're playing hard into some of these things where it's like, will some of this become a thing? Possibly. Is it going to become this prevalent? I don't know. But I do think Oryx and Crake is actually a really good discussion book. I know that when I was on Blue Sky kind of chatting about it, some people were saying that they really like that book, that there was a teacher actually that teaches at a college because said that they teach this book. And I was like, oh my gosh, what, what grade? And they said, well, the college level. I was like, okay, thank goodness. Because I do think there's a lot of hard themes and plot points that happen within this book. So definitely check trigger warnings
Mm.
before you read it. Especially towards the beginning, there's quite a bit going on that is difficult to read. Um, but yeah, I do think it's a really good book for discussion. I'm kind of disappointed I wasn't able to go to the book club to discuss it more, but I could probably talk about this book for a really long time, honestly. But
Well, go find
again,
Laura on Blue Sky,
yeah,
guys. She
talk to me
wants
on
to
Blue
talk
Sky.
to you over there.
But yeah, it was just an interesting book that I I don't know how I feel about it, honestly, except that I just really don't like the main character and I don't have a lot of sympathy for him.
Yeah,
So,
well, that
but
happens.
yeah. But another book that I read recently was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett.
Hmm.
And that one was very good as well. And this is a story of two twins, obviously twins, two sisters who grow up in this. a small town where it's a town of black people, but they are so light-skinned that they try to continually marry and have kids with other light-skinned black people because they kind of pride themselves on being lighter skinned. And what ends up happening is that the twins end up leaving the town one day, and one of them decides that she is going to pass for white, and she decides to just take on the life of a white woman. And this book handles a lot of interesting topics. And I was, throughout reading it, I was very interested in the book and everything. And I thought that the concept was something that I had heard before, and it wasn't like totally unfamiliar, but it was something like as I'm reading it, I was kind of expecting there to be like this big blow up or something to happen. And I was nervous, like
Right.
that something was going to happen. And I was a little disappointed that the author didn't dig in a little deeper into some of the things that happened. And I just kind of wish that it went farther. Like it was taking steps, but I wish it would have went farther than it did.
Yeah.
And it's like it scratched the surface but wasn't getting in. And it's not to say that the book was bad or that the author is a bad writer. That's not what I'm saying. But I just wish that she did a little more than what
Yeah.
she was doing.
That's
But
fair.
did really like it. There is some interesting representation of trans people as well in this book. But again, I just kind of wish there was more given to it. Where at at one point, like I was discussing online with people about this book, and somebody said it kind of felt like they wanted to include this just for representation. And I'm like, I don't know about that, but I guess I get that sentiment where
Yeah.
because they didn't dig deeper into the story, that it kind of feels like, oh, maybe this was just for adding some representation and maybe not developing the story more.
Right.
But oh, I don't know the author's motivation, so I'm not going to comment on that, I guess. But I would recommend the book. I just kind of wish there was a little more to it. And it was kind of a long book for not delving in any deeper than it did.
Interesting. I read The Mothers a long time ago, and I remember being like, oh, this is pretty good, but it wasn't like one of my favorite reads
Yeah,
ever.
and that's how
Like
I
it
feel
was
about
fine.
this.
Yeah.
Where it's like it
Um,
discusses themes that I think are interesting and should be talked about and made me feel things, but I kind of wish the author would have taken these ideas and ran with them rather
right.
than just kind of like, here they are.
Which also, I do know that that one was like a book of the month choice back when.
I think it was like a
And
GMA book
it
club or
was a
something like
GMA
that.
book club. And so sometimes I wonder if like books that get pushed like this, because like you and I both know this author, we both had heard of the book. Sometimes I wonder if like the ones that get pushed the most are the more watered down ones. So it's not like
Which,
rifling too many feathers, which like
well,
stinks
and that's what I was
because
gonna
yeah.
say. It might be just a palatable book for white women, which
Yes,
sucks.
which
But
sucks. But I mean, and this is no hate to the author. I think that that's also
no,
like
no, no,
publishing
no.
industry reasons and things
Yes.
like that
And
that can
again, we don't know
happen.
the author's
Right.
motivations either. And there was a lot of people that were made aware of things through this book. So there is
Yes.
value to that type of thing
Yes.
as well, where just like me and you being like, oh, it's palatable to white women. But at the same time, if it does
If
just
it
move the
speaks to
needle
you. Yes.
slightly, then it's making a difference.
As I
So we
always
can appreciate
say,
it for that.
we're all on a journey, and some of us are farther on that journey. So,
Yeah.
reading materials about a portion of the journey you've already been on can sometimes fall a little flat, or it can make you reassess where you were at in the journey all along. So, there are multitudes of things. So,
But I think this is a book that I would recommend to people still. I don't know that I'd be like, this is a bad book. You can't read it. That's not true. I think it's pretty good.
that's exciting. I was going to ask, I did want to make a joke that your next, your next, like, speculative fiction should be Nora Roberts' Year One, because I read that and I had a good time. So.
Is that the one with like a halo on the cover, or am I
It's the
thinking
one
of
with the
something else?
bird on a cover.
I might have read that one.
Oh, you might have read Year One.
I
It's
might have
her,
because it
it's
was
her
very much like The
virus one.
Stand. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
yes, it's very much like The Stand. Okay, so we've
Here's
both
my
read.
thing. I listened to the audiobook of that one, and this was when I was like on a big Stephen King kick years ago, and I had just read The Stand, and I really liked The Stand, and then I read that shortly after, and I was like, this is a knockoff of The Stand, Nora Roberts. This is not as good.
I understand. I also very much enjoyed that book. I think you're
You
right.
know
I
what?
think
I
it
was
was a
too much
knockoff
of a
of The
hater on it,
Stand,
probably,
but
but
I was like, this is a good time, and I don't hate it. But I also don't hate Nora Roberts. That's Hannah actually liked a lot of her Nora Roberts reads when I was
I have
younger.
not read
So
a ton of Nora Roberts, but what I have, I think I've enjoyed. So,
we should do one for a bonus. Just pick a
sure.
random one, and we can watch one of the Lifetime movies because
Which
there are
she has a lot of
dozens.
fantasy series too, doesn't
She
she?
does. Yeah, she's a huge she also wrote a sci-fi series that is still
Hmm.
going on that has 5 million things under a
Yeah,
different
she's super
pseudonym.
prolific.
Well, she writes like she sits down and writes eight
She's
hours a day.
she's
Like
like
that's what
Brandon
she does.
Sanderson, like
No, that's what she literally just sits down and writes. And so it's like, yeah, of course, Brando Sando, but has he made that many love connections with a blonde brunette and a redhead? I don't
he's
think
trying to
so.
get on that Nora Roberts level. He's trying so hard.
There's always the mousy one in the first book. The second one's the Spitfire, and then the third one is the mommy. Those are usually her
Okay.
trends. So,
Okay.
um,
Cool. But I've been watching Lost, Hannah.
oh, I watched the first half of Lost, the first half of the first season, and then
First
I
half of the
never
first season.
continued. Yeah, and then I never
I don't know
continued.
why. I was just like all of a sudden like, you know what? I think I'll watch Lost. I've never watched it before. I think I'll watch Lost. So I've watched like 6 episodes and it's an okay show so far.
And it was fine. Like,
I,
I always
literally, it's
like,
not
yeah.
groundbreaking to me. Like it's not where I'm like, this is the best show I've ever watched.
I
No,
was at a
it's fine.
I was at
I
my book club like a month and a half ago or something, and we walked in and someone was wearing this like Cranberry Fest shirt, and everyone was like, "Oh, I like your shirt, like Cranberry Fest, that's fun." And she goes, "Yeah, it was fine." That was the funniest. Like, yeah, I have a shirt for it. It was
it was fine
fine.
enough to get a shirt.
Like, yeah, it was a cute shirt. We all liked it. I was like, well, it's starting conversations. Like,
Yeah, well, Lost is fine. I don't know if like sometimes I'm drawn to things where people talk about the show a lot, where they're like, this is one of the greatest shows that's ever been. And so then I'm just like, you know what? I probably need to watch Lost at some point because it won a bunch of awards and I need to watch award winners because people talked about them a lot at one point.
at one
Because
point, I mean,
people
you
aren't
don't
talking
have
about it
to.
right now. So
Yeah.
then I'm more drawn to it because if people are currently talking about it, then I'm less interested. But
Interesting. See, I
yeah.
am more like maybe I should rewatch Desperate Housewives. Those are the levels you and I are at.
So I'm watching Lost and
Okay.
then just being totally contradictory of what I just said about not watching things that people are talking about. I
Oh,
watched Adolescence on Netflix.
I'm
I
2 episodes in, so no spoilers.
okay. Well, I mean, nothing is really spoilery about this
No, I
show
mean,
because
yeah.
you,
You
you
know
get
what
how it is.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a harrowing show,
Yeah.
honestly. I really think that that's one that people need to be watching, especially if you have any type of interactions with children, because some of the things that were more eye-opening to me about that show were some of the obliviousness that occurs because like the parents are very unaware of things that are happening with their children and the teachers are very unaware of things that are happening communications at school.
Mhm.
And I think that the show does a really good job of kind of just not putting the blame on specific people or saying like
Right.
this is what the problem is. They're just kind of laying things out and showing why things happen and then kind of leaving it up to viewers or the in this case like the people that were portrayed in the show, like up to those people to kind of interpret like what do we need to do going forward. We don't know, but we need to do better.
I also think it's interesting so far. I don't know how everything goes, so this may change, but I would say like 2 episodes in, I'm impressed with the fact with how they treat actual children. Because I think in a
Yes.
lot of shows, in a lot of shows we had growing up, it was kind of like children were expected to be mini adults, where it was like, well, what you do now means that you're a terrible person your entire life, you know?
Hmm.
And obviously, but like there are certain moments where I'm like, oh, they're showing different sides of a child where it's like a bully is not always a bully. Like a bully is a person at the end
Hmm.
of the day. And so, like, yes, what they can do is not okay, but we can recognize that this is a child and like it has its effects, but like they could have multitudes. And I do think that that's important when you're watching media about children because I don't
Oh,
think we,
absolutely.
yeah,
I think too that like in those first two episodes that the police officers or the actors portraying the police officers did a really good job in their portrayals. And then also the police officer that had a child at the school, I think that was an especially unique thing
right.
to show.
And so, and also to take a step back, because Laura and I are like, everyone's talking about it. But if you haven't watched it, Adolescence is a show on Netflix. It's about 4 episodes. And
Mhm.
it is about, the beginning of the show is this young 13-year-old kid getting arrested for the murder of this girl. They have a lot of evidence. It's a British show, so there's a lot of like CCTV footage of where they were, and it's them trying to build the case and find out why he may have killed her. And then, but the unique part about the show is it's very tense because
Well, it's all
everything is
shot
done
in
in
one
one
shot.
shot. Like there's no cutting. They had to do each shot. Like they
Like
did
if they
each
messed up, they
episode.
had to do the entire thing over. Like, can you imagine being that person that's like,
Oh
oops,
God.
sorry, I forgot my
Well,
line.
they said that they did like every single. They did like each episode like 2 or 3 times. Like one day, the next day, the next day, and
Yeah.
so it was like running a play. And you had to be willing to improvise because, like, if you forgot your line, you had to be able to, like, go over it or you had to be able to get to the next scene. And it's very beautifully done because, like, there are scenes you don't think about, like the scene in the car where they're driving from the kid's house to the police station. There are moments where, like, they want to cut between two people. So one car has to leave and then they focus in on the person in the background. And so it's very beautiful.
They and they do a good job of that too,
Yeah.
where they take you from like a really tense moment to like either another room or something like that to kind of de-escalate the moment.
Yes.
Because as a viewer, I think a lot of it is very tense to watch. And so
Hmm.
then their ability to kind of like take you out and move you into another room is very well placed.
Yes. And so it's very good, but and
I
a
will
lot of
say,
people
Hannah,
are talking about it.
the
So.
third episode was my favorite, and I think that one
Okay.
is the most harrowing. And
Mm,
the fourth episode was devastating.
okay.
Just
Good to
devastating.
know.
The the parents, the mother is not heavily portrayed in the series, but the father is a big focus throughout the whole series. And I think that that's interesting too, because when we're talking about these type of situations, we're often wondering like, was there any kind of abuse? Was the dad
Hmm.
angry? That kind of thing. And so there was a lot of questioning of the dad throughout the
Mm,
series and what kind of role he may have played in his son becoming someone who would commit acts of violence.
yeah.
And so I think that it was a very interesting way to portray that father figure and show this man who is a big guy who is like popping out of his polo shirts practically, but who also seems to be, a loving father who cares
Right.
about his kids and is maybe just a little confused and, you know, not always the most involved in trying to figure out what's going on with his kids.
Well,
And
and
it's
like I think
hard too
it's
when it's like you you can't fully know things
right.
about your children. And there's a moment in the fourth episode too that I think was between the parents that was especially meaningful, and I won't spoil it. But when you get there, I'd like to talk about it because it's
Yeah.
it's
Maybe it could be
definitely
our TV Tuesday for this month.
I would love that actually.
We can do and we kind of ran out of time in March. Again, Laura's goes, we're kidding, but maybe it could be our April 1st and
Sure.
we can push it out for next Tuesday. But no, that's really interesting and it's been good so far. And I do think like it's one of the first ones that we've kind of looked at stuff that happens on the internet in more of a deep way, in my
I mean, we've had
opinion.
some things touch on it, but I think, yeah, you're right that it's been less tangible. It seemed farther away. Like, this
Yeah.
doesn't always happen, but look at this
Or like
bad thing that
Law and
happened.
Order SVU
Exactly.
episode on
Like,
Rip
super
from the Headlines.
sensationalized.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Um,
this feels very real. And
yeah.
I think it's a hard watch for parents, for teachers, anyone that works with children. I think for siblings. And also, I think just me watching it as a woman, it was hard to watch at times too, just knowing, like certain ways that women have to deal with things and are treated, and how the male perspective has, effects on us. And yeah, it's just an interesting show.
Yeah, it's been good so
Episode
far.
3 is my favorite though, so please watch it
I'll
tonight.
be starting it soon.
Hannah, what have you been reading and watching?
So I read The Insatiable Volt Sisters by Rachel Eve Moulton, and
I have
I
never heard of that.
did not like it. I don't recommend
Oh,
it.
okay. Well, then never mind. I still haven't heard of it.
So I picked it up from my local library. I like saw it on the shelves and I was like, "Oh, this looks interesting." It has like two women's faces on the covers and it was supposed to be horror and I've been trying to delve a little bit more into horror. So I was like, "Oh, like, brand new book. Let me see what I think." Um I feel like I really liked the first half of this and then it just failed to stick any sort of landing because it's about these two sisters where like a decade ago they're half sisters and one of their mom committed suicide on this island that they're on, and it's like well known that women disappear on this island. And so the dad gets really remarried, and this woman stays with them. She has a kid, and around the kid's like 15th birthday, I want to say 14th or 15th, something happens and she takes her daughter away and the two girls are separated. And then we like flash forward, a decade later, and the dad recently died, and like the sisters are kind of getting back together, but like it was just really bizarre. And I really liked the beginning of the book because it was like these two sisters who have this weird connection, but one of them seems a little off because she's been on this island and she's like trying to force a relationship with her sister and doing wild things, in my opinion, where she's like, she was obviously raised with the dad because, they separated and it wasn't her mom. So she doesn't have much of a relationship with the mom, but she's like talking to the sister and she's like, don't bring your mom to the funeral. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen. Like her dad is
Right.
dead. Like this is her emotional support person. And so that was wild. And so like this is, and then the sister like lies about the will because like she wants the other sister. She's like, dad left the house to both of us. And we as the reader know that he didn't do that. He only left it to the older sister. So she's like lying to set something up, and it's like a haunted place. So you learn that the younger girl was able to talk to ghosts and there's something going on. And I was like, oh, this seems like really dark and twisted and weird. And it seems like their great great grandfather like sold his soul to like the devil is kind of the rumor in order to get one of these women to marry him or something like that. And then the end was just like, it felt so bland. Like it just felt like the writer was like, well, I don't want to offend anything, or so I'm just going to make it like a little bit magical. And I was like, no, you could just have it be fucked up and I would have enjoyed it. Like I didn't
Yeah.
need like, oh, there are these like wild beasts and this monster underneath. And oh, one of the sisters wants to save us from the monster. It's like, that, what? Like it was just really weird and parts of it didn't make sense, and like it just felt like I was like, wow, the beginning was so interesting. Like I was reading it for a while, I was going through a slump, and like I ran out of time at the library and I literally like returned it and went and picked it up from a different library so I could finish it, and I was like, this is just boring. Like I don't know why I read this anymore. um
I hate when you get to that point in a book where it's like, I think it's too late to DNF.
yeah, where it was like, I think I have to stick my head down and like stick the landing, but like it was
And
weird
I'm
and
a
like the
big
romance
person
were
on
weird and like
DNFing. Like I
right.
love to DNF a book, but I once you get to a certain point, and it's not all the time, but like certain books, you're just like, well, I'm not stopping now.
Right. Like it's just so freaking wild. So I don't recommend that book. I didn't enjoy it.
Okay.
I'm sure people who like, if you like a thriller, I think you might like it for like, ooh, horror thriller, but not for me.
Okay.
And then another meh book I read The Life Impossible by Matt Haig. He wrote the
The Midnight
Midnight
Library. Yeah.
Library, which I loved. So I was like, oh, I'll read The Life Impossible. That's his next book. It's more like magical realism. I do like that it is an older woman. We meet this
Okay.
woman after she's retired and she lost her husband. She lost her son when he was really young to a car accident.
Mm.
And she also lost all of her money. She got scammed. And she finds out that this one woman who she spent one Christmas with left her a house um on, oh my gosh, what's it called? It's like a party island. Um let's see. Oh, Ibiza. So she left
Okay.
her the small house on Ibiza and she goes and she thinks that the woman may have died, and you find out the woman thinks she was about to be murdered. And then we find out that there's like this way of becoming like powerful on the island, and this older woman does this, and then it's kind of about her journey to like find found family and forgive herself for some of the mistakes she made. And it was really cute, but it wasn't like as fantastic as the Midnight Library. It was just kind of okay. And again, the ending didn't quite work for me, where I was like, there's just, I think it's a wild plot when you bring in the fact that the lady who left her the house thinks thought she was going to be murdered and then like tried to escape to a different plane of existence. So, like, in the depths of this story about like self-discovery and finding yourself later in life and becoming powerful, and what would you do if you became more powerful, is just a murder plot. It
Okay.
doesn't quite make sense. And it just it comes out of nowhere and you're just sitting there like, oh yeah, I guess we're finding out about this other person who wants to like have control over everything. Like it was just really
Hmm.
strange and it was a very sharp turn. And so I enjoyed it. I think he's a really effective writer, but I don't think it was my favorite of his. And then just a lot of
I still
audio.
need to read The Midnight Library.
I don't think you should yet, but that's just me.
Okay.
I think you're okay to tap out on that one for a while
Sure.
longer. Um, and I think that that's healthy sometimes to not pick
It
up
may just
books
sit on
that,
my shelf forever.
yeah, I think that that's also okay. I mean, Crying in H Mart is still on my shelf. I've thought about picking it
Oh,
up
I love that
recently,
one.
but then I'm like, oh, am I emotionally ready? As someone who last week was like,
I
I
wasn't
really miss my
emotionally ready.
mommy. Like, last week I was like, I can't believe my mom's gone. And I'm like, Hannah, like, you need to calm down. You knew this. But so yeah, I read those. And then, yeah, let's see, for enjoying, except for adolescence, which I am greatly enjoying, Laura and I talked about this as well. I am participating in a local community library scavenger hunt. So
Which
the
sounds super fun.
the Milwaukee Public Library System has a huge scavenger hunt going on in the months from end of February through early May, where you can visit every single library and get a little stamp. And if you visit all 29 libraries, you can have three entries, or no, four entries into a raffle. And so for the last couple months, I've been visiting different local libraries, and it's a cute little treasure map. You get fun little stamps. It is meant for children, but adults can participate too, guys. And on each one, you write something you really love about the area. And so it's just been fun to kind of see all the different local libraries, the different infrastructure that is offered at different local libraries, because there are places that like you can tell service like older communities and they have like memory kits to help with like people with dementia. And I've been going on these days towards tax season. Everywhere has tax forms, everywhere has people using the internet, using printing, getting their taxes filed. There are things like tools you can use, little baking pans for 1-year-old cakes and 2-year-old cakes,
That's
um,
awesome.
different seed libraries so you can plant your own garden. There are beautiful murals, there are beautiful children's spaces, and I've really appreciated getting to visit every single one of them. I think it's important to see all the different libraries that are in your community because things I've learned through this experience, all of the suburban Milwaukee County Library districts, they have their own special stickers. And then when you get into the central library in the city, they all get the same one, which stinks because those
Mhm.
are important and they probably service more people than the suburban ones. And so that's frustrating to kind of realize that and to realize like even like in community buildings that are meant for the community, you can still feel a little bit othered. And I did not like that. But
Sure.
I think it is helpful to visit all these spaces to understand like the importance of libraries, especially today and this day and age, because I don't
Hmm.
think people understand how much libraries do for us and how important they are. I went to my local library and there was a town hall going on in it recently, and like that is also important. I don't. We need third spaces that are still free, and it feels like they're becoming less and less.
Yeah,
Which
I
sad.
do think that people underestimate like you were just saying, like the ability to just like exist somewhere.
Yeah.
Like I know that I take advantage of my local library a lot, honestly, if I'm just like, oh, I don't have anywhere to be right now for this. I have to be at a meeting at X amount of in X amount of time, and I don't know what to do until then. So I will go and just hang out at my local library and
Hmm.
read or draw or do something
Yeah.
there, or just look at books because y you can, and it's less awkward than sitting in my car or like
Sitting in a McDonald's when you
going
can't eat anything at McDonald's.
right, or like I guess I could walk around a grocery store. Like, okay.
Right. Yeah, so it's been very fun. I've been doing it with my sister-in-law. That's been a ton of fun. Just driving around these different places, finding cute little stickers and just getting able to like participate in an activity in your community, I think is really important. And
Yeah.
so that's been something I've definitely been
I will say
enjoying.
too, if people want like more services to be offered at their libraries or whatever, I think always a good idea is like because I know like I often complain about like, oh, my library doesn't offer this or doesn't offer that. Something that you can just do is just, like message them and ask or email and ask or just go in and ask like, hey, would you guys be interested in doing this?
Hmm.
And a lot of times they will do it if
Yeah.
they have people who have an interest. Because I know that recently at my local library that there was an interest in having board games to rent out. And they didn't have any there, and now they are getting them so
Yeah,
that they will be available to loan out board games.
that's huge.
So yeah, I think if there are services or things that you want your library to offer and they're not offering them, don't feel afraid to ask for them.
Laura, I downloaded or I got an account on that board game website so you and I can play
Oh,
games.
BGA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we should play.
we should do it. So yeah, I think that that's huge. Ask your libraries. They want to be of service to the community. That's the whole point. Uh, and just, it never hurts to ask for a book or something to do.
Right.
My
And
sister-in-law
also, I feel like
literally learned how to finish a crochet because she took it into a
that's
crochet
awesome.
circle that was full. And she was like, well, it's a library, so no one's going to tell me no when I say, could you help teach me how to finish this? And just a random lady was like, yeah, of course, here's how you do it. Like,
Well, and I think too, they're good at like pointing you in the right direction. If they do not know how to help you, they will get you in touch with someone who can help
yes.
you.
So
But I,
they're
I do
people
think too,
people.
like if they don't have the books you want, or they're not offering like this specific thing that you need, to just ask and they can either get it through interlibrary loan or
Hmm.
whatever connecting service that they have. And that is also a way of supporting your local library, even if you're doing interlibrary loan or what have you.
Truth. So let's dive in to the stone sky.
The Stone Sky.
Da, da, da.
Hopefully, I'm starting with the right chapter because I can't even remember. I'm hoping it's
We
chapter
are
six is where we were
on
starting.
chapter 6. You are correct. Good
Okay,
job.
good.
Gold star
It's
for Laura.
it's been a week.
It's
Uh,
been a month. It's
it's
been a
been a lifetime.
decade.
It's been a
Yeah.
lifetime. So, chapter six, we start off with the POV of Nasun, and Nasun and Shafa are traveling to Steele's Dead Civ ruin, and it's fairly uneventful and lonely. And
Yeah.
Nasun does have a fever at one point because she's still recovering from her shoulder injury,
Oh,
and
industry, whatever will become
we can't ever
of
recover from the industry,
me.
but
Yeah.
she's recovering from her injury. And she's also having these moments where she like kind of misses the other kids and everything and feels bad about all of that. But she's really glad to have Shafa to herself. And she's worried about him and he's not sleeping well. And neither is she because she's so anxious and worried about him and what's going to happen. And sometimes she lets his core stone have some of her silver when he's sleeping because
Yes.
when he's awake, she knows that he would not consent to this. So I don't necessarily like the idea of this like non-consensual situation, but
Well,
she's also a child and she
yeah,
means well, she's trying to heal him.
she's literally 10 years old trying to like so like I could
I think
see
she's 11
where
at this point probably.
yeah. But they do refer to her as a 10-year-old a couple of times in this section. That's why I got the
Oh,
10,
okay.
but like
Maybe she was
um
9 when we started out because I just know it's been like a year.
right. So I do think she was probably 9 when we started out and then because they do
I'm
make a
losing
couple
track
of
of
ref
time and
no, you're
the
fine.
kids.
It's been a decade.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's 10 now. So I do think it's like I think she gets a pass
It's
for me because she's 10
well,
and she's like,
same. I just wanted
yeah.
to point out that this is kind of a weird situation because it
Yes.
isn't something he's not consenting to, even though he
Right.
is Icky Shafa that we do not like, but
Go
still
back to our
he's
themes and
not consenting
characters
to this
on what it
treatment.
takes to become, a better human being, and if you're ever
Whether or
allowed
not
to.
he's getting his redemption story, we
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So as they're traveling, Shafa is telling stories of Humanus and of the old families there, and he also tells stories of the Fulcrum. But he doesn't really remember much of Essun, even though Nasun's like kind of trying to ask a little bit about her every now and then. He doesn't really remember. And as they're traveling, things are getting darker and more still, and it's kind of like an eerie situation. And on their
Yes.
29th day of travel, they reach the old man's pucker, which is a caldera inside of a caldera, which is just like
Oh.
this big hole, basically.
Yes.
And Nasun can assess how it was made. So Steele has them camp away from it. And
Yes.
when they get closer, she realizes the people there were meant to get inside of this, and that Steele's dead Sivaruin is underground in the magma chamber, and that the silver here is brighter and flowing between things, and that there are these impressions of buildings. And she's like, "This is
Mm-hmm.
weird." And
It's
she
like a weird,
notases
it's so trippy. I love
it,
it.
it,
This is
it
such a
really is.
beautiful section.
This whole section that we're covering, honestly, is just so interesting, and so much is going on compared to other
Yes.
sections that we've covered. Like in the Obelisk Gate, there was many times where it's like, okay, this is just a lot of dialogue and stuff. This section, there's a lot happening.
Mm-hmm.
But she notices that the sapphire is still following them from a distance, but they've kind of outpaced it.
Right.
And Shafa says that obelisks were created in places like this, but that the shattering is what destroyed this city. But the shattering was different everywhere that it struck. So it may have looked like a volcanic eruption here, but it may have looked like something else somewhere else. It
Right.
didn't have the same effect on all the same places. But he can't totally remember the shattering. He's not sure if he was there because she kind of questions him on that. Like, so were you around for that, or what was the situation?
And he's like, honey, I can't remember
He's like,
how my life
I
works.
don't
Like,
know. And this is also kind of an interesting portrayal too, with Shafa like kind of losing his memory because
yeah.
I feel like it's a little bit of a call to like memory loss and
Yes.
how that can be really complex to deal with these types of things. So they work their way through a forest because Steele told them that they must reach the center by dusk. And this is like this really creepy forest, and they're like trying to fight their way through here. And Nasun's like, I wonder if I could use Erogeny to get through here. But Shafa's like, you don't want to do that. There might be other guardians nearby, and they they might just come out and they would try to hurt you or something. He's like, I'm trying to protect you. Do not do that. I'll just continue slashing my way through here like a powerhouse because I am Shafa.
I
And
am
he's
Shafa, hear me roar.
and then he's continually like saying these things and like having these like memories of sorts. And he's like, I think we might be on our way to Warrant. And Nastin has this moment where she's like, oh yeah, Warrant is where you're from because you're Shafa Guardian Warrant.
Yes.
And so they finally make it out of this forest and onto this slab at the center of this like white material. And when Shafa touches this metal curl that like comes up out of the ground, a doorway appears and reveals this really strange tunnel.
Mm.
So they go down these stairs, and Shafa's in the rear to protect her from behind. And they're going down, and there's these steps that are lit on the way down. And it's gave me very much like we're talking about like the tunnel underground in Jeff Vandermeer's series. Like that's the kind of vibe I was getting, like this living situation. So then we switch over to Sil Anagist 3. And the field excursion begins as a walk through the city. And it's overwhelming for the group at first because there's all these smells and sounds and noise. But the amethyst floating over the city calms Hua
Hmm.
because Hua is the point of view that we're getting here. So the cities used to be dead, he knows, and that still Anagist is better. And we hear the voices of the fragments. The amethyst is part of us, and we're part of it. And Kalenli is leading the group, and the people are staring at them as they're walking through. And Hoa notes that they'll always find them strange, and that Kalenli kind of just walks with her head held high. She doesn't let it bother her. And they're like, you know what, we're going to copy what she's doing too. And they kind of get some criticism for this, even amongst their group, for copying the way that she walks and kind of like taking on some of the traits of the people there. But they end up kind of being like, it's not about them. It's about us and about us being able to discover this. And so it seems like Kalinli wants to show them this waste infrastructure of this place, but instead she brings them to this like big, beautiful, obsolete building. And they go inside, and it's essentially a museum. And inside of it, there's this engine with like a central crystal that's glowing at its center. And its structure like doesn't make that much sense, but its purpose, they realize, is just to be beautiful. And this kind of frightens the group. They're like unaware of art.
Yeah,
And
they're unaware of a lot of things because they're like, we're
oh,
getting
for
into
sure.
sections where there's like use of words that we would know, and everyone's kind of like either fearful or they're not understanding. It's really well done in this section.
Absolutely. And honestly, like I just talked about Oryx and Crake with you, like this reminds me a little bit of things that are happening like within Oryx and Crake. So we have
Oh,
all these dystopian things like overlapping.
beautiful.
So then, like I said, the group is like frightened by this, and uh, they realize that it's art. And Hoa is like confused, and he asks Kalinli to show him more about this. So then we switch over to chapter 7, and it's our POV. And Yika is actually more willing to accept Meshish than we thought she'd be. But he has Ashlung, and the other members of his group are also pretty sick too. So Yika actually does think that they have some use within their limited time. And we're kind of surprised because she doesn't take a jab at Alabaster in this situation, which we really thought she would. And we're like, well, maybe she wants to be friends again, that she's not like hitting us while we're down, while we're grieving, and saying like, your friend that died was always mooching off of us. So,
I, I also think this is the chapter where we are like, I guess we're in it for the long haul right now. And we're like
yeah.
really bitter about it, but I did love it.
Well, I think it's so interesting too to like look at the evolution of Yika specifically, and how she's now getting to a point where she's like, these people might not last that long, but they could be useful in the time that we have them here with us.
Hmm.
And so we also mentioned that Hoa took our stone breast and he eats it in 3 bites, which I thought was worth mentioning, just 3 bites.
I also said that you could tell this book was written by a woman because if a man had written it, he would have been eating her boob, and
Forever. It would have it went
NK
on so long.
NK Jemisin was just like, he's like, hey, could you hand me that? And we just like take it off and hand it to him.
Chomp,
And
chomp,
she's like,
chomp.
why didn't you eat it the way you ate the arm? And he's like, this just seemed more comfortable for you. And I was like,
Yeah.
written by a woman.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
versus like if it was a man, it would be like,
Like,
oh, gently caressed it and
licked it, and she could
delicately
definitely
did
feel the
this or
stone
that.
boob at that moment,
Yeah.
even though we already established she can't feel the stone boob. Yeah,
Right.
totally.
So Hoa thinks that Nasun wants to open the obelisk gate herself, and we
Hmm.
aren't totally surprised, but we're a little scared because we're like, well, that's going to kill her. And Hoa's like, "Mm, yeah, yeah, it might." And so we know now that Stone Eaters can perceive Nasun, and Hoa tells us that she actually has one with her, and it's the one we call the Gray Man. And this is
Hmm.
Steel, who Nasun is with. And we're really worried because we're like, he's manipulating her. And we start to react really angrily about this. And we're like, all of you people are terrible, blah, 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 blah. And Hoa's like, look, I never lied to you. I I've always been truthful with you. Like I care about you a lot. And he said, but I need to tell you something, and Jija is dead. And so then he basically shares the whole story uh, through our POV because he knows what's inside of us.
Hmm.
And we're surprised and we question if this means that Nasun is safe. And Hoa tells us that Nasun did not mean to kill Jija, which, or did mean to kill Jija.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did mean to kill Jija, which shocks us because we're like, oh my gosh, she's really changed. We're having a hard time kind of like separating the Nasun of now with the Nasun that we knew. We kind of still see her as like this little girl who needs our help. And
Oh,
so,
she is a little girl who needs her help, but
oh, for sure. But she, I mean, we know
But
as
she's
readers that she
experienced
has
so
been through
much.
a lot
Yes.
and she's experienced so much and she is extremely capable.
Yes.
So we ask Koa to take us to where Jija died. And when we travel through the earth, we are kind of surprised. Like Hoa tells us to close our eyes and we're like wondering if we can hold our breath that long, but we realize we don't need to breathe. And we
No.
end up actually opening our eyes and we're in this like really wavering space. And we end up on this hill on top of a plateau. And we're like, this is weird. This is like a camp of sorts. And we see the sapphire obelisk to the west that's following
Mm-hmm.
Nasun. And we're like, oh my gosh. So that's the direction she went. And
Mm-hmm.
the camp that we're in is empty. And we see a village below at the foot of the hill. And at the edge of the compound, we see a stone marked 4. And we question if this is like the Antarctic fulcrum. And Hoa's like, no, that's not it. And
They're kind of like
also,
they just stole their story.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was like, this has been purged. This is just like a weird homage to
Yeah.
that. Like, this not the same. And
They
so,
wish.
right, like they're just being weird, uh, trying to kind of make their own cult. And so this man comes out and kind of surprises us, and he's like, "Are you a guardian too?" And we're like, yes,
Yes. Yes. Yes, I am. Thank
we
you so
are.
much for
And
noticing.
and we start smiling, doing that smiling thing or whatever.
Yeah.
And he kind of gives his own rendition of what happened. And he's like, well, they found 2 dead guardians when all those kids left on their training trip a month ago. And Shafa, he went too on that trip. And we're like freaking out because we're like,
Mm-hmm.
Shafa, are you kidding me? Shafa is here. And
No, he
so
should be dead. Wait, nope,
we're like,
nope.
are
I
you
should
kidding
have
me?
realized that.
How could he have lived?
I do love the
And
moment of her being like, or us being like, I should have known better.
oh my gosh.
Like,
So Nas or Asun is like trying to maintain control and uh, we're asking after Nasun who the man knows and he's like, well, she's a little odd and I kind of hope that Shafa kills her because she just
yeah.
gave me bad vibes.
So freaking dark. Like, oh my
Oh,
gosh.
and he's like, she's the one who killed Jija and shattered him. And then he also gives his own rendition of what happened. And in this moment, we have like a break in the story. And Hoa's like, I really feel for you in this moment. I wish I could make this better. I am sorry that this is the way that this story has to be told because this is so hard to deal with all of this.
Right.
And so we ask the man to tell us about Jija. And he tells us that Jija came to this place because he thought you could become unragas. And he basically kind of started to unravel when he
Mm-hmm.
realized that this wasn't going to happen. And that as time passed, Nasun was just becoming increasingly attached to Shafa and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so we feel awful knowing that Shafa has become a safe place for our daughter and that he knew the secrets that we've spent forever looking for because we're like, you know what? Of course Shafa would know about this. Of course he would have all of this info that we've been trying for the longest time to figure out.
Well,
And
and I think this is a really good moment because there's also this moment where we get frustrated because we're like, it seems like he's the safe space for her in a way that we failed as a parent because of him. And it's just like, oh,
exactly,
and
we
it's just like, it's
passed on
coming
all of
full
these
circle.
yes, we passed on all of these moments to her and we're like, he should have been the one to break her hand. Oh wait,
Hmm.
it was me.
Yeah.
I had to be that person.
Yep.
Okay. So the man questions us about the world and he's like, it just seems like this season is not right. Like, are things ever going to go back to normal? And we're like, well, you know what? Not enough people wanted to share. So now we all burn. And I
Hmm.
think that that was just such a like gut wrenching moment to have to read that. But we start to break down because we're scared of Nasun and what we made her and how we made her us.
Hmm.
And we're just upset because we owe her. We owed her better. Like
Yep.
we should have done more.
Well,
And
I
so
think that that's such a, I don't know, it's such a beautiful moment of like a dystopian novel told about mothers and daughters, where it's like, oh yeah, we fail each other because that's
yeah,
this situation we're in, but we can still grieve that. We can still know that like we are trying our best, but it still wasn't good enough. Like I think that's very human.
Absolutely. And so then Ahoa drags us down into the earth because he's like, okay, things are, you got to get out of here. We're here
Mhm.
too long. Things are going to start to unravel. And that being pulled into the earth is nothing compared to how we feel being a failed mother. And so we're unsure what to do or where to go because we feel like we have nothing left. And Hoa tells us that we still have our life and that we'll never lose him because he can't die. And it's safe to love him, which is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And when we ask how he keeps doing it, he tells us that he moves forward. And so we go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then chapter 8, we're back with Nasun. And there's no dust and the lights are still working, which is kind of confusing. It's like unsure to her like how the science is sciencing, which
Yes.
it's a little unsure to us as well.
It's almost like it's magic.
It's almost as if it's magic. So she's trying her best to kind of gauge Shafa as well as they're kind of traveling down into this stairway. And he's like, I don't really remember why Guardians came here during seasons, but let's just keep moving. And he's like, here's the thing. I don't feel like we didn't have anything to offer a com. We couldn't have kids. And
Yeah.
Nastin's like, well, did you ever try? And he's like, oh, that's just not a good
Yes.
idea because we could have had because we carry the trait for orogeny, so we could have had an origin child. And Nastin's like,
What a dark
oh,
moment where she's like, yeah, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it's just
uh,
like,
well,
oh, honey.
the
Like,
way that you read it like that, like, oh, okay. I read it more of like a she just takes everything that he says as like just gospel, where she was just like, oh yeah, okay, got it.
no, I do think that that's how she's doing it, but I'm sitting there like my reaction is like,
Oh, your
oh no,
reaction was
yeah,
like
my
that.
reaction
Okay.
because I'm like, that's not great, honey. Like he still has all the dark things inside him because he's not really questioning that or like questioning it with you
Yeah.
or pointing out that it's wrong. You're just like, makes sense, of course. Like,
Yeah,
no.
that's the way that I took it, where she was just like, "Oh, okay, yeah, totally. You guys shouldn't have procreated. Why would we want more origins?" It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
So Nasun is also like questioning him about his core stone and guardians in general. To which Shafa kind of has this moment where he's like, "Here's the deal. I loved all of my origins, and I kind of felt like my treatment of them was justified because it was better than genocide, which was basically the tasks that the Guardians were sent to carry out because they were kind of meant to prevent orogeny from completely disappearing. What a twisted situation. So,
I can't imagine being like, yes, this is who I'm going to like tie my. I like I do understand because
it makes sense, but then it's also like
yes.
just another like heart-wrenching moment after this because she's starting to like question all these things and she's like, you know what? I think that Steele is right. I think that he really is right. That the things that he wants to do, they make sense. I think that I'll
Yeah.
help him carry out his plans. And you know what? I also just feel so much love for Shafa. What a great guy. He's
Well, again, it shows like when
yikes.
someone is being displaced or marginalized, they like am treated as if they're inhuman. They were opened up sometimes to be used and abused by that because they're taught
Mm-hmm.
they're nothing. And then, like we've said before, a modicum of love is necessary,
Yeah.
and they're allowed to take less than really, which
Yeah.
just
I
sucks.
also think it's kind of like an interesting thing too that we see this in Shafa, who has been indoctrinated with this, and how he then fully believes it and then passes it on.
Yes.
So, yikes.
Yeah.
So they keep moving down, and the stairway starts to become wider, and then it becomes like a trail of sorts. And Nasun realizes that it wasn't originally enclosed, but that this eruption must have went up and over and somehow like encapsulated the city and kept it safe. And she's like, I wonder who built this place. But it's like a weird city. It's just metal and sand. And Shafa's like, these places used to hold like billions of people. And which is like a mind blowing thing to say because right now the stillness has very few people. So,
Hmm.
what happened to everyone? And Nasun realizes that the foundation of this place is plants, that it was a living city. and she
Mm-hmm.
senses something bad is happening there. And the flows of silver are just not quite right. Something is eating this place, and that's why it's dead, and the magic is kind of gone. And though she's scared, they keep on going and they come to steal. And beside him is this plinth, which we know it's a plinth from previous chapters,
Mm-hmm.
and it's rising from the floor. And he's like, "Here you go. This is yours." And he tells her that she needs to go into this other place and power and reboot the system to use the station. And she's like, okay. And Chef is like, "I'll always go with you." So the two of them go into this place, and she sees this like bed wagon of sorts, and she's like, "Oh, this is something that can be used for transport." Okay. And there's this light coming from a tunnel ahead, and it's like this bluish volcanic glass column. And she's like, "Oh, an obelisk must have once sat here." But what happened, it was must have tried to like ascend like the other ones did. And somehow it crashed back
Crashed.
down into the earth and
Mm-hmm.
caused this earth fire back on the city, and which is the result of where they are. And so
Right.
Nasun and Shafa, they keep moving forward, and she sees where she needs to put the power. And he kind of questions her like, "Are you sure this is what you're supposed to do?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is it." And she reaches for the sapphire too, to just like kind of have some comfort too in this moment. And she's like, the sapphire knows this place, and she ends up having this vision of the city as it once was. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, that must have been from the obelisk." And Shafa's like, "Do not trust obelisks because they were created to kill origins. And
Right.
I know what Steele wants. He does not want you around. He's just using you. Do not trust obelisks." And so they keep moving, and they come across this like weird fungus and these vines of sort, and they're like eating silver. And she kind of senses these gaps that could be filled with silver, and she knows that she has to power the system. So she reaches for the sapphire as an amplifier and gives the system tons of power, like more than
Yeah.
necessary. And using magic and orogeny, she does this. So Nasun then has this moment where she's like looking at these vines, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, these vines have silver put into them, and Shafa can't draw from them at will." And because of this, he's kind of lacking in his ability to serve as a guardian. Like he can't
Right.
protect me in the way that he
Mm-hmm.
should be able to. So he kind of is endangering me. And she has this moment where she starts to choke up, and Shafa comforts her, and she's like, it's okay. I have to protect you too sometimes. Like, you're
Yeah.
my new father, you're my family." And
Yes.
I could puke. Like,
It's just he's
so,
been so awful, like just like microaggressing up a storm, and she's like, "But I love you," and it's
like,
like,
he calls her a
no,
monster. And then
yeah,
she's
like
like, "But you're my new father. I have to protect you sometimes." Ugh.
you literally have no use to me, but I should protect you. Like,
Like, oh my
yeah,
gosh. And then she confronts Steele again, and she's like, "Look, I don't care that bringing Shafa was a mistake. Like, he needs to be here." And then all of a sudden, these germ-like carriages start to grow and appear towards them, and this
hmm
door appears, and so they climb in and they decide to go to the other side of the world. And I love that in this moment, like as these things are appearing, Nazrin has this thought where she's like, "Of course, a living city would have these things that look like germs to
right.
carry them around." So the next chapter is Sil Anagus 2, and inside this beautiful building, Kalinli is leading them. And on their walk, the people there were staring at them, and they were touching them and whispering at them. And there was even a man who said things like, "We should have wiped you out." And he tried to kind of get violent with them, and the guards had to hold
Yeah.
him while he was trying to get at them, which is kind of I shouldn't say kind of, it's a scary moment for them. They don't know like what's going on, why he's saying these things. And when they ask Kalenli about this man, she's like, "Oh, he's a cystanagestine, and that's just kind of how they are." And so they're going around this house, and the house has these flower beds and like this carpeted floor of lichen
hmm
almost, and it's just the whole place is like a curiosity to the group. And Hoa is like watching Kalenli and noticing that she's kind of just watching the group and enjoying them enjoy the place. And he
Yeah.
has this moment where he's just like looking at her and he's so appreciative of her and wants to like keep following her and know about her. And he's like, I think I'm in love with her. I don't know for sure about feelings, but this feels like love.
But also, I don't know if I'm attracted to her. Like, there's a lot of like
Yes.
mixed emotions where he's like, do I love her? Do I
Yes.
love you?
So then she motions for the group to follow her into this other room, and they realize, oh, like this is like kind of her home over here.
Hmm.
And she starts to tell them that she actually grew up in this place with Conductor Galat, and that she wondered why the people she thought were her parents treated her differently. And
Hmm.
she found out that basically she was an experiment to
Hmm.
see if she could be human, and
Yep.
that they kind of were conducting a nature versus nurture situation,
If we
which
put you
is
into a space where
sickening.
everyone knows that you're different but you, will they treat you differently? A test, if you will. Like,
Here's the answer.
what?
Yes.
Yes, people
Will you
will other
recognize?
you.
Yes.
Will you
Okay.
feel othered by the people who are actively othering you?
Yes.
Probably.
Oh my gosh. So she then tells the group that the stillness once was three lands, Maker, Kahikar, and Siller. And Sil Anagus was part of Kahikar, but Ka Kakharira, I can't even say it. I cannot say this word, it's long. But slowly the Sil Anagus took control of all of these lands and colonized them. And some of the people of Siller, the Nice, the Nias, fought and they tried to keep their land, but eventually they kind of ended up being like the diaspora. They just kind of persisted and spread out and maintained their culture wherever they could and
Hmm.
moved and spread about the land. But they also had this magic, and because they had that, they were a threat and they were to be eliminated, which led to the creation of those like Hoa, who were designed from the remnants of those people.
Right.
And Kalenli reveals that she actually studied these people for a really long time and that they had this practice called truth telling and passing information on. And who is like, you need to forget about them. Just quit worrying about the Nias people. Like, let it go. And she's like, why? Why do you want me to let it go? I just want you to be informed. And he's like, I don't need to be informed. And she's like, well, you wanted to be strong enough to hold the onyx, and
Yeah. And
that
guess what you need to do if you
these are the
want to be
people that
strong?
you need to know about in order to do this. And Kalenli is like, I'm a lorist. And that's interesting because we know about Loris.
Yes,
So
we
here's the
do.
origins of them. And she says that understanding the Nias people is crucial to
Hmm.
mastering the Onyx. And then she says that they're going to go see the Nias, which leaves Hoa very confused.
Yes.
So we switch back over in chapter 9 to our POV.
Hmm.
And we're thinking about how the desert is a dangerous place in a season and that there's a lot going on here. Like, not a lot of water, but the water isn't as much of an issue as like getting food because a lot of the animals are underground and also like predators are going to be an issue,
Hmm.
things like that. But we do have some relief from the sun because of the ash, but there's also not a lot of plants and everything. So it's kind of a rough situation.
Hmm.
And the journey has been and will continue to be rough. But honestly, Mashish and his people have been pretty helpful because they're from the area, they're used to foraging and all of that and helping to get food. And they're kind of, redistributing supplies because they're low and everything. And on the night before we reach this big desert, somebody comes to talk to us, which kind of shocks us. And it's Daniel. And she reveals that she kind of knows that we're thinking about leaving
Hmm.
and that she wants to come with us because she's a
A
lorist, which
lorist. She's a lorist.
shocks us because we're like, what? No, you're a warrior. And
It's so funny to me that in this book, Nasu or Esun can think of so many things. We can think of so many things of
she
like the world of
can't wrap her head around
possibilities.
people
Uh,
being able to do two things.
people having to move their jobs during the end of
No,
the world.
absolutely not.
No, you were a lorist. You will always be a
You're a radio
lorist.
DJ. You will never be able to do anything besides be a radio DJ.
Daniel, coming to you from the car today. Turn this up in your headphones.
Oh my gosh. So in this conversation too, I think it's worth noting that uh Daniel also uses the term raga, and we have a moment where we're like, no, you don't get to use that. You haven't earned it. You don't get to say that. And it's kind of a tricky situation because Yika has tried to normalize this word by making it like part of a caste use name,
Yes.
which but we're
But
still like, no, it's still a slur. You don't get to use that. You don't get to own that. You haven't earned it. You're not.
well, it's
No.
again, it's like the people who are like, "Oh, you've reclaimed this word, so I get to use it now." And it's like just because
No.
we
Nope,
reclaim the
nope.
word, just because it's not offensive when another woman calls a woman a bitch sometimes, like in a fun
Mhm.
little way, doesn't mean you get to do
Right.
it.
It's very different if like Hannah and I are somewhere we're like, hey bitch,
Hey,
versus
bitch.
like one of us just like going to Walmart and somebody
Right.
saying, hey bitch. And that person who says that is like, I don't know, a big man
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a different feel.
that we don't know.
Yeah.
So, I don't know why, but that just makes me laugh.
Well, we've talked about this that we like we think that's kind of funny when you're like, "Hey, bitch." Like,
I
I
know.
think it's funny. But like, yes, if a man screamed that at me, I would probably have a problem with it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So Daniel's like, here's the thing, like I had to switch jobs and Loris are good in a fight. And so that's why I became a Renana soldier. But here's the thing. I know when stories are being written and I need to follow yours. And we're
hmm
like, well, we don't know what's being written. And she's like, yeah, the main character never does. The hero never does. And we're like, oh, okay, well, we didn't realize we were the main character. Wow, what an
Yep.
honor. And so then we're like, but here's the thing, we don't really trust you, so I don't know why you think we would be like, okay, come along. And she's like, think about it, because I really think that this story needs to be
Yeah.
unfolded and told for a
Yep.
long time. And so later that night in Lerna's tent, after sex, sexy
When she's
time.
like, when we're like, if this was inevitable, but like also it's just fine.
Okay, here's the thing. Are you also a little like confused? Like, why did this need to be a relationship? I was
I
even reading it this time. I'm like, I care so little about Lerna, and then we have like these moments where us Esun, we're like, I have really complicated feelings about this. Like, it's nice, and he really supports us in these moments, and like makes us feel a little better about ourselves, like calling us beautiful and helping us and stuff like that. But at the same time, I don't know that we'll ever really love him. Love him.
Yeah, I think it's like a
I
good
didn't think I could
look.
love anymore, but
It's a good look at people because I think like oftentimes we see this in movies where, this is something that's looking at different tropes of a dystopian novel and like, making them more complex. And I do think it's interesting to take the look of like the movie Speed, the Keanu Reeves like
mhm.
discussion at the end where it's like, oh, romance is built out of drama, never last. And I think like that happens a lot in these types of things where it's like dystopian and it's like, I
Sure.
love him. And I think it's interesting to look at it from a pragmatic standpoint of like, no, people are probably going to
Yeah.
have sex during the end of the world, but it probably isn't
Yeah.
going to be that deep because like there's
Yeah.
so many more things going
But
on
here's the
than
thing,
your
it's like Lerna
relationship.
seems so invested, and as soon
Learna's like,
as
I'm going to come with you. And we're like, but maybe you're needed here.
Esten's like, let me ask you for your advice. Do you think that we should bring Daniel along? And Lerna's like, yes, absolutely. And we're like, don't know about that. We'll just ask you for advice, and then when you say things, we're like, you're kind of a baby.
Nah, you're so young.
Yeah, I don't know. Stick to being a doctor. And so the season, as we're going, the weather starts to get worse. And
Mhm.
season, we mentioned too that like it's unsure like how a season is going to be affected by the weather, how the season will affect or the weather will affect a season. But there's acid rain and there's hard roads, and Yika starts setting like this really brutal pace, which is causing people to start to fall behind and get lost. And we notice we're like, oh, we stopped getting our period. And we're like, I
Mm.
don't think it's menopause, but could be.
And
But then we're
also,
like,
I'm
oh, wait,
starving and I can see
we're,
my
yeah,
ribs.
we need some food. Like,
I may
we've
just
lost
be
a lot of weight.
emaciated. Yeah.
And so there's this moment where this older woman in the comm on Throg has to tell Yika to leave her behind. And Yika, who has been so strong throughout like all of this, really, really struggles with this moment. And the food is running out, but the people are still kind of holding on to hope. But
Mhm.
just a few days later, they reach they need to just get through the desert because they're like, that's what we need on the other side of the desert. There's food in Renanis. That's what we need. But just a few days later, people are starting to get desperate. And you know what? A few days, like even though like reading that back to back, it sounds like really they gave up that quick. A few days is a huge amount of time if you're in these conditions and you're
Yes.
starving. So
Yes.
people are starting to get desperate and they go off for food.
Hmm.
And they wait a short period of time, and Yika is like, here's the deal. Anyone still in the camp is part of Castrima, but anyone who hasn't returned, unfortunately, they're comless. And
Hmm.
so then we head north. And Hoa has this moment where he kind of pauses the story and says, I'm not sure like if this was the best way to tell this story, if it was too fast or harsh, but there's healing and suffering in these moments. And I'm trying to comfort you a little bit and let you know that the old woman, like I helped tune her pain and kind of lessen the pain on her last moments on earth. And I sang the song that Antimony sang for Alabaster because you know what? I'm human after all. And here's the thing, Castrima is surviving, and so are you. And then we reach the southern edge of Renanis. So in chapter 10, we're back with Nasun, and
Hmm.
they're in this vehicle, which they call a vehicle, which is just
I did
kind of
write
cute.
up. I was like, oh, this vehicle. I was like, oh,
Isn't
Laura's
that
gonna
just cute?
love saying this on the podcast. I thought that to myself as I was reading this section.
You knew I would think it's cute.
Yep.
Okay. Well, as they're in this cute little vehicle, Shafa is like translating what this voice over the intercom is saying. He's like, somehow I kind of know this language. I'm not for sure. And he's restless and he's been in this vehicle before, he thinks. But he's like,
Hmm.
I'm
Maybe
just
even the
not sure.
seat.
He's like, I think maybe in this seat, yeah. But there's just no context to any of his memories. And Nasun's like, okay, you know, he's always been a little bit off, but as we're kind of progressing, he seems to be more and more damaged. And so she's like, "Do you want to like take a rest? Like you could lay down, take a nap." And he's like, "No, I'm good. Got to protect you."
Gotta be useless to you, but also just be aggressive towards you.
I will say though, he's not completely useless because he still throughout this has like maintained all his strength and everything, like chopping their way through this forest and all this. So he's not completely useless, but when it comes to anything related to any kind of magic, absolutely useless.
Yeah.
But anytime they need any muscle, helpful. So they reach this transition point and the vehicle changes and it moves through this tunnel and it's kind of moved by this like cilia on the sides of it. And Nasun sees this hole, but she's like, I can't figure out the depth of it. It's like hard for me to assess that. And then the vehicle starts taking them down into the dark of this hole. And she realizes that they are literally in the earth.
Yep.
And Nasun is like thinking about all this and she looks over at Shafa and Shafa's like looking at her glowingly and he's like marveling at her and he's like, you know, that people used to say that origins used to rule the world, but then they started to fear you and try to wipe you out and everything. They called you monsters. And he's like, even if you are a monster, you're just glorious. And I'm like, oh, the way that you try to give a compliment is the most disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. And he's in pain, but he's continuing to smile through the pain. And Nasun
Hmm.
realizes that the whole vehicle is made of silver. And she's just kind of like amazed by all of this magic. And so
Yes.
they move. then more silver starts flowing as they're moving, and
Hmm.
Shafa starts like getting a ton of pain. He actually ends up doubling over in pain, and Nasun realizes that this magic is getting brighter, and she's like asking Shafa like, where does your core stone come from? Like, hey, Shafa, like, talk to me. Like, what's going on here? And he can't answer. He's in so much pain. And the vehicle changes, and Shafa's like writhing in pain. And then all of a sudden, the evil earth notices Nasun and speaks, hello, little enemy. And it
Hmm.
wants Nasun dead. And
But
so,
Nasun also wants it dead.
yes, these
So
two are at odds.
yes.
And so Shafa is convulsing, and all of a sudden, this face appears, and it's basically the earth. And he's like, Shafa is mine. And I say
Hmm.
he, it's just an it. They've been
Yeah.
referring to evil earth as a he.
Yes.
And
Not Mother
so,
Earth in this scenario. It is Father Earth.
correct. And so Nasun's like, I know Shafa didn't want me to do this, but I have to perform this surgery to save Shafa. But it fails. And so the earth says that what was stolen or lent must be recompensed,
Hmm.
and that he wants his due. And so all of a sudden, Shafa starts to still, and the vehicle moves on, and eventually they reach core point. And Nasun is holding Shafa in her lap, and she's like, "This has to stop. All of this
Hmm.
has to stop." And so
Hmm.
then we switch over to our final little section here, which is Sil Anagus 1. And it's revealed that Kalenli is taken away in the morning. And it's like unexpected. And Conductor Galat shows up, and we start like kind of questioning, like, what's going on here? And the two of them have a confrontation. He's like, quit being ridiculous, quit sleeping in this shed. And Kalenli's like, why do you even care what I do? Like,
Right.
just leave me alone. Like, I've
Just
had a
feels like
rough
it's none
life.
of your business.
And Galat's like, I've always been good to you. And Colin's like, okay, thanks. Appreciate it. And so she's like, I thought I had 3 days. And they're like, you know what? You need to hurry up. And so they end up, Conductor Galat is like in a terrible mood. And so they end up going along with Galat, and he starts like kind of telling them the reason that they developed tuners, because
Hmm.
they needed somebody capable of like running this plutonic engine and priming it and kind of like maintaining it and everything. And so we're kind of questioning, like, why are you upset with Cleanly? Like, what's the deal with you? Like, something seems off here. And
Right.
you just kind of seem dangerous. And finally, he just breaks. He's like, "Why do you think I'm mad at Kalenli?" And we're like, because you're like angry and throwing a fit." And so he says, "You know what? We grew up the exact same situation." And we're like, "Well, she was part of a project." To which
Right.
he's like, "Well, I was too. I was the control, and we both had the same situation." Which I think is which I think is so interesting, because this is also something that I think we see a lot of in, like, especially adoption stories in our
Yes.
real world, where it's like, oh yes, there are two siblings, one is black, one is white, and they grow up in the exact same circumstances, and maybe they weren't the greatest circumstances, but it's
Right.
hard to separate how just being a person of color is harder
Well,
than.
again, it's like it's saying specifically like as a white person, we can go through many hardships, but we will never have one of
Yes,
those hardships be someone judging us based on the color of our skin
correct.
in a position of, in a world or a country
And
where
this was
we
what
are
I
the
was kind of
majority.
taking away from this exact situation here with
Yeah.
Galat versus Kalenli. And so he says again, he says again that, like, he never mistreated her, and that he always, you know, he was really good to her and everything. And he's like, I didn't treat her like, and we know what he means, like one of us.
Right.
And that Hoa's like, but we're not the Nias. We're not them. And then we have this moment where we're like, oh, but we're always going to be othered. To them, we're always going to be different. We're never going to be them. And we have this moment where we realize that that's why they hate Kalenli, because she wants to be a person. She wants to be free. She doesn't want to be trapped by this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so she realizes that, or Hoa realizes that, well, the still Anna just need to stop being the way that they are. That's the only way to kind of end this. And
Yep.
so Galat is like, here's the deal. I think we just need to kind of answer some of your questions. We need to take you to see the Nias because you know what? They're still alive. And we're like, what? Are you kidding? Like
Right.
this we thought
This
this
was
was
a
just
whole
like
part.
a story.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we follow him into this place and it's basically this awful room where there's all of these people kind of flowing around and everything, and they're all kind of connected. And we realize that they're basically just sucking the magic out of them, the silver out of them, using them to power these systems. And the conductor's like, it's peaceful here. You'll see. And we just have this, Hoa just has this moment where he's like, oh my gosh, there's no this is too much. So we need to form a plan
Mm-hmm.
because this is awful. And yeah, Galat tries to kind of twist it around to make Kalenli seem like the villain, but we have seen now what is truly happening here.
Yep.
And that is the end of this section.
Guys, we're one step closer to the final sections of
We're almost there.
Stone Sky. A little bit of housekeeping for everyone. After we finish this book, we have a couple more episodes and then we have our wrap up episode. We will be shifting back into Oathbound. Well, covering, sorry, I needed to be more
Tracy
prepared for that.
Dion's
Tracy
Oathbound.
Dion's Oathbound, the third book in her series. So we are excited. That book just
Legendborn.
came out. So please make sure that you are diving back in, catching up so that you can cover Oathbound with us. Get it from your local library if you haven't bought it yet. I'm so
Yes.
excited to dive into this. Laura's already read it, I think.
I listened to
And
the audiobook because I couldn't wait. And friends, the audiobook is very good. So Libby, Libro FM, pick it up.
go get that. And so we'll be doing that. And then we will be doing our indie mission. We're giving ourselves a little bit of a breather to cover Oathbound before we dive back into indie mission, so that we can have a bonus before we cover Oathbound, where we pick the next indie mission.
Yes.
We eventually hope to get back to voting for indie mission picks, but while we deal with the hellscape that is all of our social media
Yeah.
accounts, we just feel like this is the best way to cover some different
It's
books.
it's kind of hard to decide where the best place to kind of gather everyone to vote is and the best way
Yeah.
to kind of go about voting at this point because we don't really want to maintain much of a Twitter presence anymore.
It's kind of
And
just an update now. And
yeah, and it's hard to kind of collect votes on newer social medias that don't have as many
yes,
options and stuff. So, yeah.
it's just a little bit easier to continue with our knockout round bonus rounds. And this time around, we are focusing on indie authors who are people of color. So that will be
Yeah.
an exciting new round. We'll have a lot of new books. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for that. And, then we will give you an update during Oathbound of what will happen next because there's
Yes.
more to come. We have some exciting things coming down the pipeline, so keep tabs on us right now. But we can't wait to cover the final section of Stone Sky next week. So make sure you're
Hmm.
reading for that plot episode. And thank you so much for listening today. If you
Yeah, we
could
really appreciate it.
rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. Tell a friend about us and follow us on all of our social media accounts
It
at
really helps.
OWWR Pod. And please check out ourpod.com. We just had a blog post put up yesterday
Yeah.
for a
Cello's
brand new
Gate.
book for Cello's Gate by Maurice. I can never remember how
I
to
think it's
pronounce his last name.
Average.
Affridge. Okay. By Maurice Affridge. So make sure you're checking out that blog post. He was nice enough to do an interview with us. So we really
Yes.
appreciate that. And join us next week as we complete the Stone Sky.
The Stone's Gate.
Bye.
Bye.